Do you remember when I first really started teaching AimPoint and we said we're going to change the history books?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think we've done it?
Oh, 100% we've done it. And that was 15 years ago, maybe longer.
I mean, 65% of the PGA Tour using AimPoint Express to read, and they're already good. They're already super elite level, but they're adopting the AimPoint system to read greens now.
Yeah, well, the tour was slower to pick it up than I would have liked. But if you had told me 10 years ago that 10% of the tour would be using it, I'd be thrilled to death. And what they're seeing is so many people have won a lot of money and really improved their putting stats using AimPoint. And at some point, it's not just a fluky this guy or that guy, but there's so many of them that you just can't deny the stats. I mean, the numbers speak for themselves.
Yeah, I mean, we always sort of strip everything back to the feedback loop, don't we, when we're working with players? How, if they miss a putt, was it speed, was it read, was it start line? Mm-hmm. And I just don't think you had that if you're just guessing a read. If you approximate a read visually, you can't change it by units.
Right. One thing I always notice, and y'all can chime in on this, but when I would watch most putting instructors on the golf green, they would stand, kind of face onto the player. The player would make the putt, miss the putt, and they'd say, "Well, your grip looks a little different, or maybe you pulled it or pushed it." But the problem is they didn't know whether they were trying to hit it.
Yeah.
And if you don't know whether they're trying to hit it, you don't know whether it was the correct aim or not. So you have to know where you're trying to hit it. Was that the correct aim or not before you even evaluate anything else?
And how much would you change it by? Because if it's just this much break, is that 2 units or 10 units? So being able to increase it by 1%, 2%, now we can have a tangible change to the read, right?
Yeah, there was no feedback loop of, okay, you misread it, why? I don't know, you just misread it.
Yeah.
Play more break, well, why?
Exactly.
And now we can systematically back into a read and say, well, I misread it because I just got my number wrong. Okay, no big deal. Get your numbers tighter.
Versus play more break. How much more break?
Yeah.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Play more break.
More.
More.
I think another breakthrough was the change in break as stimps change, because we've heard talk about green speeds just mean the ball rolls for longer, but I don't think everyone was really picking up on the fact that it means it breaks more and it has to travel on a wider arc.
Yeah, most people don't realize when you go from stimp 8 to stimp 12, the break doubles.
Yeah.
In general, you get double the break from stimp 8 to 12. So 50% more green speed, double the break. Mm. And I think that's a shock for a lot of people when they're used to slow greens and they go to fast greens. It's not just the speed control, but it's, all the breaks I'm accustomed to seeing are now 50% too low.
And they normally don't have a system for dealing with that.
No chance.
Yeah, and there's also the increase in break from 1%, 2%, 3%, 4%. So it must get even greater at 4%, right? It must be more than double.
Yeah, I mean, everything in putting is nonlinear. Everything changes on a curve, which makes it difficult, but people don't understand, when you increase speeds and slopes, the break starts exponentially increasing. And if you don't keep up with that, you've got a big problem.
And, once people have got good green reads, they can now play a good speed. We see speed control affected massively by misreads. For example, if someone underreads a putt, they instinctively have to hit it hard to try and make it, or push or pull the putt. So people being able to match their speed better with a good green read. Obviously they know what they're trying to do, but quite often having the wrong read, instinctively they change their speed. Have you seen much of that?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing I hear first from people is now they're realizing their speed isn't that good, yeah. But then the first thing that happens is their speed instinctively gets better just from having a correct aim or an appropriate aim.
When AimPoint was transitioning from a computer program to a chart, which we know was an amazing way of reading greens, mm-hmm. I think that's when you first became an instructor. We were using charts, right?
Sorry, yeah.
So way back when. And it was easy to get people to predict break, but obviously people would make mistakes. So inventing the express read was just we've got to say, like a series of lucky discoveries.
Yeah, I mean, the chart was great, and I first came up with the chart because I had run the computer program and was using that on TV, and a tour player came to me and he said, what would be really great is if you just told me how much the putt broke. Because we use some concepts like it breaks more here and less here, and as you go above 90 degrees, it breaks the same, and some pretty cool ideas. But he goes, yeah, but I would like to know exactly how much it breaks. And so I created the first chart, and I went out and used it myself in a round of golf, not even knowing what I was doing. And I had, I think, 13 putts on the front 9 and 14 on the back. And I never used to make anything. And I was making putts outside 6 feet all day long. And I just remember thinking, wow, there's something to this. There's something to this. So the chart attracted people who were really detail-oriented and wanted very precise numbers. And it gave you that. But it was a little more technical to learn. And then the Express read was just a complete accidental discovery that matches the chart. And the big surprise for me with Express was, on paper it's a little less accurate, but in real life people made more putts with it because it was less technical, it was more athletic, it was more natural, and their performance actually was better with a method that was technically a little less accurate than a numerical chart.
Bit more room for sort of personalisation sometimes in changing ball speed if you want to be aggressive or you want to miss high. There's a little bit more room for
it was
how you
definitely
feel.
It was definitely more adaptive to the situation. And the other thing, the chart was really accurate if you got all the inputs correct, meaning you have to have the stimp correct, the distance correct, the angle correct, and the slope correct. And as each of those variables got off, your read would get more and more off. And suddenly with Express, we're really dealing with a lot fewer variables, and there was room for error, and there was room for personal feel and how hard you want to hit a certain putt. And you didn't have to be precise with a number with a stimp. And so it was crazy how much better performance we got out of people using Express for a system that was not designed to be a highly accurate system. It actually is the most accurate one we've ever come up with.
Yeah, and a great deal more fluency on the golf course.
Yeah.
Execution is a lot simpler, it's faster.
Yeah.
No mathematics, which a lot of people, a lot of the feedback I got with the chart was I love it, but I'm standing trying to do math on a golf green.
Yeah.
Yeah, which people just, they find it a little time consuming and confusing at times, being honest.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think fluidity is the word though, isn't it? You know, you're working the puzzle out whilst moving. There's very little stationary stuff apart from when you really want to hold the hands up and get the exact aim point.
Yeah, and I like the fact that you don't have to carry anything at all with you.
Yeah.
I like the fact that you walk on the golf green with nothing. You don't need anything whatsoever to read a putt with the Express read. You don't need a level, you don't need a computer, you don't need a chart, you don't need anything whatsoever, and that makes it really an athletic system.
Yeah, and you know, I think a lot of people that are confused by AimPoint that haven't learnt it, who would say that can't work, don't realise some of the laws of physics that have just fallen in line to make it work, like the distance from the hole, that angle you're creating, it matches the rate of break. So you don't have to know exactly your distance to the hole, because once you hold your fingers up and you've got that angle, whatever distance you're at matches the correct break value if you've got the slope right.
Yeah, I mean, we've been doing Express for 11 years now, and it still blows my mind that all your reads in golf between stimp 8 and stimp 12 or 13 or 14 match the length of your arms and the width of your fingers. Yeah. It all fits our natural anatomy, which I still can't wrap my head around. It's just a kind of a lucky fluke, but it's shocking how accurate it is.
Like the side tilt can match the amount of break so perfectly. Once you found that key area to measure and you've got the correct number, how over a 60-foot putt, and even a double break is only one measurement, how it can actually match the break perfectly. I mean, that's mind-blowing. You can have multiple slopes, up, down, all the same direction, but you're only measuring in a couple of areas, and it gives you the exact read.
Yeah, the first thing I found out when I started simulating putts way back in 2004 was that there was a geometry behind all the reads. So if you take the green and you map out all the reads and all the breaks, there's a very clean geometry to it, and that was kind of mind-blowing to me. But if you think about it, well, there's a geometry to physics. And so there has to be a geometry to something that's the result of physics. And once you really get under the covers and look deep into it, it's absolutely fascinating. But it just lends itself to, of course the Express read would work and all this work, because you're just trying to figure out the underlying geometry and matching it.
And I always remember Wayne back when, because you used to be a code writer for Hewlett Packard, right? Mm-hmm. And one of the things, I remember you telling me this story, I hope I get it right, but when you were writing a code, it would be great, that's great, now how do you do it faster?
Yeah.
and that's what you use to progress the green reading system to what it is now. Because even though it's been perfect several times, you've still looked at it with the mental with the mentality of, now how do I do it faster? How do I do simpler?
So I worked in an R&D lab at Hewlett Packard in there, and this was in the mid 90s when they were just coming out with HTTP and internet and networking and internet protocol and all these. And the rule was, first it's got to work, then it has to work fast.
Yeah.
So what they learned very early on in computer science is that if you create a program that works perfectly but takes too long, nobody uses it. And so it's the same thing with anything, especially green reading. Is yes, I can write a program that perfectly predicts break that's 100,000 lines long, but if you can't use it as a golfer in a few seconds, it almost doesn't matter. And so for 2 decades we've worked on refining it to the point where it's just faster and faster and faster without losing accuracy. That's the hard part, is how do you make it simpler without sacrificing accuracy?
What seems like a simple subject of, we've solved the mystery of where to aim, yet we're still coming up with new things all the time. It's like the read's evolving even now. We every year we say we can't beat that, and we do, and we have done for 12, 13 years.
Yeah, and it's exciting to think of what the next discovery is going to be, because in my intuition tells me there's still some really cool, amazing ways to do this that we haven't stumbled across yet. Because before Express came out and I was doing the chart, people were saying, well, can you simplify it? Can you simplify it? And in my mind, I'm going, no, you can't. You have to know all these variables. There's just no way to make it easier. Guess what? There was a way to make it a lot easier. And so now the question is, what's the next big breakthrough on that?
Well, I mean, a lot of people don't realize we can factor in wind, we can factor in grain. I mean, what else is there that could affect curve on a green? What other, I mean...
I think we've got all the inputs solved.
Yeah.
So
it's performance now, and how do people actually take that perfect read, control their speed, and, technical changes. We've seen people, and I'm sure you agree, Gareth, how they could have putting issues technically, but once we've solved where they're aiming and their speed control, that those issues will dissolve almost, or get less of an influence. Have you found that?
Yeah. Once you give them clarity, and I think that's a word we should always use when we talk about AimPoint, because we're taking people from guessing to saying, you're in this area, we've given you the read, that's what you got to do right now. Almost within 5 to 10 minutes, we see manipulation start to disappear within the stroke.
Yeah.
It's non-conscious because the player wasn't consciously manipulating in the first piece.
Yeah.
They might say, I tend to pull left to righters or push left to right, but they're not executing that on purpose. So after a few minutes, they kind of look up and you can go, wait a minute, I haven't hit a pull or a push in the last 15 strokes. And we're like, well, that's because you've got this freedom now that you know you're facing the right place. Give or take, we're not putting people in boxes, I'd be very quick to stress that, but we are giving them clarity and freedom, and the executional part as a side effect gets much cleaner, and you see the speed get much better as well.
Touch and feel, words that we hear players use a lot, is a byproduct of not having to manipulate or exaggerate bad movements, right? Because it's always the same.
Well, as a corollary to that, if you don't have a good read, the only way to make a putt is by pushing and pulling or opening the face and manipulating your stroke. So with a bad read, if you have a perfect mechanical stroke and you're reading badly, that's going to disintegrate.
Yeah.
Or you will make nothing. Literally make nothing whatsoever. And so as an athlete, your brain is going to say, well, I've got to do something to make this putt, and it's going to introduce the manipulations.
100%. And I think another thing is, like, when you're learning AimPoint, we move people around the green quickly. They're hitting lots of different putts from different areas, different break amounts and directions, and they're not just hitting the same putt again and again and again, which historically has been how people have practiced. We see people hitting a 5-foot putt on a training aid again and again and again, and they might be able to start it through the gates and follow a path, but that's not transferable when it's a 30-foot putt. Or there's a big break.
Yeah.
Or
20 feet slope, ball under your feet.
Yeah.
It doesn't transfer.
People are practicing a skill which is fairly irrelevant, right? Because if they get a flat 5-foot putt on the golf course, then yes, they've done some training that relates to that. But it's always different. And if you underread a 30-footer right to left, you've got to learn to push it hard or aim dreadfully. So they've practiced perfection and then ask themselves to adjust in play.
Yeah, I mean, statistically, if you have a perfect stroke and a bad read, you'll make fewer putts than if you have a imperfect stroke and a bad read.
Yeah.
Because the imperfect stroke makes up the difference for the bad read.
Yeah, but who out there is going to knowingly set out to have an imperfect stroke?
Nobody. That's
Right?
the problem.
So I would always say, a lot of putts that we see being missed are missed before the putter moves.
Yeah.
Because if they have got an incorrect read, then we know they have to do something wrong to hold the putt at that point in time.
Yeah.
And the chances of doing something wrong with any degree of consistency, because now it involves manipulation, you will not consistently manipulate, your forearms won't rotate the same amount, whatever the case may be. And so, yeah, you're going to see, but I don't mind people missing putts. As a player myself, I don't mind missing a putt, but I hate to think I would miss it in my preparatory stage.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't mind an executional issue. I can push and pull. That happens.
Bad roll or a bump
That's
or
all.
something.
Yeah, so that's part of sport, and you accept that, But to think that there was something you could have done prior to moving the putter that would have made you, really ramp up your success chances, that bit for me is key. You've got to give yourself the best chance.
Do you think a lot of people's stroke issues would be circumnavigated if they learned AimPoint before they even learned to putt?
Yeah, I mean, I always say, the first thing you have to do to be a good or a great putter is have a good read. If you're working under full swing and you don't know what their target is, then you don't know where to set up. How can you possibly have a good full swing if you don't know what your target is? And with putting, people get up there, pick the wrong target, set up to the wrong target, and then miss and have to start manipulating. So you have to start with a good target.
I'll never forget, you showed me a video like 14 years ago or something, and it was maybe a 12-year-old hitting putts.
Yeah.
And it was a big breaking putt, and they aimed at the hole, and they missed 4 or 5 foot low. And then the next one they smashed really hard to try and hold it up against the break, and then they started to push the putt or open the face at impact, and maybe it was like 7 or 8 putts, but at no stage did they adjust their aim to higher. It was like they were beginners, and they just started to try and shove it up the slope.
Well, one of the biggest misconceptions I think with green reading is when people say, "Oh, it's in you, it's innate, you're born with it." And I can tell you, none of us are born with a physics chip in our brain that tells us how much the ball is going to break across a slope surface. And so when you get a new putter, a new student or a kid, they putt, they aim straight the hole, it breaks, and they miss. They aim straight the hole, and miss. They aim straight the hole, and misses. And over many putts, they start aiming a little higher and kind of get an idea what's going on. But you don't know. You don't. I mean, I've worked with people who have played golf for 30 years, and they look at a putt and go, "Got no idea what this does."
Yeah.
And so AimPoint just eliminates that and says this ball must break a certain amount. Whether you see it or not, it must break a certain amount, and that's where we're going to aim.
I mean, we see dozens of players at tournaments scratching their head and questioning their read after they've missed a putt, and they're the elite, they're the highest level. I mean, you go to a tournament and the routines never change, right? Remember we went and we measured, I can't remember, we were at one of the Opens and we measured the time it takes from start to finish on everyone's pre-putt routines.
Yep.
And it was amazing how they were almost to the second.
Yeah.
And they're still making mistakes.
Yeah.
Like the definition of sanity, right? Doing the same thing and again and expecting a different result.
I think that comes down to probably the world of sports psychology has unfortunately put people into boxes with regards to routines, and you must adhere to your routine. And I remember reading a quote, and this goes way back to Lao Tzu, I think, and the quote was, always adhere to your routine until you shouldn't. And I just went, that's brilliant. Yeah, because we have all had that situation where a player kind of steps out of routine, hits a putt, and you go, why'd you hit that quicker? Because I felt ready.
Yeah.
I was good to go. I knew it was good to go. I had that moment of clarity. And if we interfere and say, well, you have to keep that 40-second preparatory stage, they might feel ready at 25 seconds and it's gone at 40 seconds and they possibly missed the putt because of our instruction. And that's not part of our job. We want to see people getting better. Going back, Jimmy, to something you mentioned about learning AimPoint, I think one of the things I always get asked is it very technical?
Yeah.
Is it only for professional golfers? Because we see it on tour. And I'm like, I have had kids stand the putting green and I'll just ask them 2 or 3 questions and go, oh, so the ball has to go that direction or that direction, right? And so, Mark, what would you say if I gave you something and said you've got 10 minutes with somebody here, Will they learn AimPoint? Will they have a better understanding of green behavior?
So
behavior?
I had to fight lots of skeptics in my life with AimPoint, starting all the way back 20 years ago with the chart.
Yeah.
And Express, when it first came out, it seems too simple. It seems like it can't possibly incorporate all the physics of a golf ball breaking into your fingers. And the reality is, if I can get 10 minutes on the golf green with anybody whatsoever, they're sold. I have never in my life had somebody on the golf green for 10 minutes where they said, no, I'm still not buying it. Yeah. Because all you do is you do the process, you hit the putts, and they go, well, that actually does work. Yeah. And it was designed for children. This read was designed for 7-year-olds, and I've taught as young as 6 and 7. They get it no problem. I've taught it to hundreds of golfers who have never touched a golf club, and they get the same reads I do within 20 or 30 minutes.
Was it the case, Mark, that you came into golf not a golf instructor, right?
Yeah.
And a little bit of a closed shop.
Hardly even a golfer.
Right, okay. I'm guessing you had to fight a few elements of snobbery, preconception. What does this guy know about golf? I mean, you were banging your head against the wall there for a long, long time.
Oh yeah. So I patented the AimPoint software in 2003, and it didn't get on air with the Golf Channel till 2007, and it was probably 2009 or 10 before the commentators stopped questioning it. So we're talking 7 years later, and 3 years of live lines, thousands of lines per year. When I say live lines, the virtual putting line we put before the golfer hit. And then finally, at one point, about 2010, one of the commentators said, we put a line up and it looked too high, it looked like too much break, which it always does. And the commentator says, I've learned not to question aim points. It makes you look stupid. So eventually they said, yes, it might not look like what I would play, but we've seen enough repetition now where it's just right. Like it or not, it's just right. You can fight the physics, but you're going to lose.
We still hear people criticizing it on television broadcast of tournaments, don't we? That's just their lack of wanting to learn and find out, whereas they've just trusted their opinion first.
Well, and all those people have never actually used AimPoint. The people you hear criticizing have never actually taken a lesson.
And how many, we added them up at one stage. I think it was in the last 3 years, more than 50% of all professional tournaments were won by someone using AimPoint.
At least 50%. Those are people I know that use AimPoint. There's a lot of people that I don't know of who use it, but it's at least 50% of all tour wins, men and women.
Makes you putt better, speeds up play. When you get it wrong, you know what you've done wrong. What's not to love?
I think as well, Jimmy, what people don't appreciate is anything we have brought to the marketplace on top of Express and how we've kept working in the background, we try to break everything first.
Yeah.
Nothing goes to market unless we're absolutely certain it holds up, because this is going to be on live television, right? We can all look very silly very quickly if it doesn't work. So we're the ones who probably try hardest to smash the system, because we have to find the points of failure if there are any.
Right, and what people don't realize is we've never released anything in the market that hasn't been tested for a minimum of 6 months, sometimes a year.
Yeah.
And our process is, let's get this and try to break it. We'll go out of our way to try to break something, because I'd rather break it myself than give it to a tour player and have it break on them in the middle of a tournament or when they're trying to win a tournament. So we fully vet everything we do before we put it out there, so we know it works, all the time.
Yeah, it's I always say it's hugely scientific in the background, but we transformed it into feel and art in the foreground. It's the art of reading greens. We're using feel through our body, and we're giving you freedom as a player. I still don't. Why wouldn't you do that?
One thing we know is nobody's ever gotten worse doing AimPoint. A lot of people have gotten a lot better, but nobody's ever gotten worse from doing it. I can't even think of anybody who stayed the same after doing AimPoint. They all improve, and some improve through the roof. They improve. The ones who really dedicate themselves to stick it to perfecting it and sticking with it all the time, they're the ones who do the best.
How many times can you join a class as a no clue and leave as a world class? As a world class green reader. We get people that come to us that are clueless.
Yeah.
In 2 hours, they're reading putts at the same level as the world's best golfers.
Yeah.
How many lessons can you take like that?
Nothing else in golf.
No.
No, there is nothing else in golf that compares. Not as a system. And it's the text messages we all get, right? And they you will not believe what you've done to my golf game. That's extremely gratifying. That's why we do what we do, is to get that text message. And it's I would say again, people don't realize, yes, we work with a lot of tour players, but we work with a lot of normal golfers as well, and
Yeah.
it's almost as gratifying to get a text from the player who has been battling to break 90 or battling to break 80, hitting their goal and going, you won't believe this, I just broke 30 putts for the first time in my golfing career. That's great.
Well, we took 5 guys through the system yesterday, and all of them have messaged me and said it's the best money they've spent in golf. The best lesson,
Yeah.
the best value, going to make the biggest impact,
And the quickest results, probably.
and the quickest results.
I think the piece that is often highly underestimated in coaching is everybody thinks of adding more in, but I would suggest that we actually do the opposite. We take stuff away,
Yeah.
and they're not suddenly standing behind a golf ball with 72 different things they're trying to
Yeah.
think about and execute.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We're taking a lot of stuff out and saying this is what you need to know.
We've worked in reverse order.
Yeah.
We've started technical and dumbed it all the way down.
But it's the
Whereas
but the
most
technical
people-
stands up in the background. I think is key.
Yeah.
You know,
People
we
try
know
and
it
go
works.
technical.
Well, and the funny thing is that's been lost with AimPoint, because in the beginning they always said about AimPoint the criticism was it's too technical,
Yeah.
it's too mathematical, it's too scientific. I can't be an athlete and keep in the flow. And we've swung so far the other direction that people actually will say, well, there's no math behind it.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, there's a lot of math behind this. There is way more math than you're able to process behind this.
Yeah. We were teaching with charts. We're teaching people to read greens using a booklet that has 600 numbers in, and it looks like 4 dartboards. And there was a lot of success with it. But then, who was it that that shoots crossbows, or bow hunter that?
Rob Noel,
Noel,
AimPoint instructor from Louisiana.
And he came to you and said, well, tell us the story.
Well, the story was I'd been trying for about a year to simplify the chart read, because it was, it's very accurate, but people would do it for a while then drop out because it was work.
Yeah.
You had to devote some time to get really good at it. And so I kept thinking there's got to be something easier, and I was grinding on it, and I never could come up with anything. And then I was going to teach what he called his itty bitties, his young kids, a class. They were 7 and 8 years old. And I was on the airplane texting with him, said, I'm landing in 30 minutes, and I'm coming out there straight to do a class. And he said, listen, man, these kids haven't learned angles in school yet. You can't teach them angles because they don't know what a 30-degree angle is. So he said, quote, you need to think of something else. And I remember going, oh my God, I'm teaching in like 2 hours, and I don't know what to teach them. I have no idea. So it turned out the revelation was he was a bow hunter, and he would use, in bow hunting, you can use your thumb to range your distance to a target. So if your thumb is vertical, for instance, it covers a 10-foot space if you're 20 feet away, or there's some proportion that your thumb works. And so you can figure out how far away target is, and there you figure out how high to hold your bow. And so what we said is we got the kids to feel the slope and feel the high side and put their thumb on the high side. So rather than going up with it, we were going sideways with it. And they got up there and they'd feel it, and they'd hold their thumb up, and they'd hit these amazingly good putts, because your thumb's about a 1.5, which is kind of your average putt, right? And they were and the amazing thing is they were very fluid and relaxed, and they were happy, and they weren't thinking real hard, and they were hitting putts on the high side, which is where we're trying to get kids to hit the putts. And so he called it the thumbs up read. Yeah. And it was meant for kids. Right? And I came back and I showed it to about 50 or 100 AimPoint instructors in Orlando the next month. And I said, oh, there's this kind of fun little thing we're doing with kids, and it's called the thumbs up read, and you do this. And they all looked at me like I had lost my mind. Yeah. They were literally rolling their eyes going, what are you doing? And most of these people had been very technical because they were self-selecting into the first AimPoint certification, which was the chart. Yeah. So they're very technical people. And then within less than a month, we realized if you hold up 1 finger per percent, it matches the chart almost exactly. Yeah. And that was mind-blowing. And then another month later, Brian Gay shot the course record at Kapalua using it, not even knowing what we were doing. And that's the moment where I went, there's something here. Yeah. We have got to figure this out, because it's just, even though it's weird looking and all that, people just liked it better. Players would say, I just like it better.
There was also a moment when someone was telling us how they were serving in somewhere, and they were told if they had a watch malfunction, each finger from the horizon was 15 more minutes of daylight.
South African, yeah.
Yeah, and I remember that's time and angles, which is what the chart was. Yeah. And it works with people sailing. They use palms off the mast. That's angles.
Well, I think they used it in ancient Egypt. They used it for measuring distances. So they would use their forearm. There's different parts of your body you can use to measure distances. They can even measure, I think, distances between stars or something by seeing the space between stars. And military uses it. There's lots of applications outside of golf.
Yeah.
But it's basically you're creating an angle, and it just happens to be that angle that you create with your fingers matches how a putt breaks.
Yeah.
Why? No idea. It just does.
Let's just go with it.
That's the big mystery right there is why.
Yeah.
Well, as long as it works.
Yeah.
Why
I'm
is the nerdy
dying. I
stuff in
still
the
want to
background?
know why though.
So why is the background stuff? What's fascinating as well, Jamie, is this works kids, senior players, guys with really big hands, ladies with really narrow fingers. It just works, right?
Right. So what people don't get is the first complaint people say is, well, my hands are bigger or smaller, or my child is 10 years old. And
what if?
And the reality is it's not just the size of your fingers, it's the size of your fingers and the length of your arm combined.
Yeah.
So it's basically a triangle, and it just turns out that pretty much all humans have the same proportions between their finger size and their arm length.
Yeah.
So regardless of how high you are, and we've all done this with children, we've all done it with 6'5" men, they see the exact same break.
Yeah.
The children and the 6'5" guys see the exact same break.
It's very
you keep
rare
getting
we have
told.
to really change it for someone.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was going to say you keep getting told that's not possible.
It is.
But if we put T's in the green,
keep
so
doing
we're
it.
seeing it. Yeah.
Well, it's like the Vitruvian man. Your height is your fingertip to your fingertips with your arms outstretched.
Yeah, there's a natural geometry there that holds up, and then anything that's off a little bit, you can adjust with arm bend, and you're done.
And those are the little fine tunings that players could use to just get that little bit sharper, right? Just like matching stimp, and like with any system, there's a little bit of personalization, a little bit of taking it to the next level. But as we know, as soon as you give someone a basic read, they already putt better.
Oh, the most basic read in the world improves them without even any fine-tuning or advanced knowledge, or immediately get better.
A lot of people worry about slope, the numbers, but realistically, I think you could use 3 numbers and improve your putting. Would you agree with that?
What, 1, 2, 3?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, 90+% of all your putts are 1, 2, 3.
So it's not even like you have to learn dozens of numbers.
No.
You're working on flat, average, steep, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what a system.
And in terms of, I think the number one concern players cite to me when they arrive, and this is tour player right up to relatively new golfer, is what if I can't feel this? Right?
Yeah.
Have either of you ever encountered a player who genuinely you didn't think they could feel it?
No.
If you can stay upright, you can feel slope.
Exactly.
Because your body feels slope to keep, one of its primary objectives is to stay upright and keep breathing, right? So if you're walking across an uneven surface, your body will adjust its posture. Now it's done that because it felt something. Yeah. And maybe sometimes you have to help people go on massive slopes and learn they can feel it. But I always think that if someone doesn't think they can feel slopes, it's because A, they've not been taught properly.
That's a big one.
B, they're so worried about getting it wrong that they're not just going with it and feeling it. And as you know, the first 15 minutes of a class is all about leading people through the slopes. And at the end of that, very rarely do you get people that can't feel slope.
In 15 years, I've never had a single person who couldn't feel slope. And I don't think I've even had a person who couldn't feel down to a 0.5%.
Well,
so 0.5%, everybody gets within 20 minutes, 30 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, I've had people telling me that it all feels very similar. But as soon as we go and do reads, maybe 20, 30 minutes into reading putts, they start talking 1.5, 2.5.
Yep.
And I always say, I thought you couldn't feel much.
Yeah. Well, you've made an important point as well. The body's always naturally, a lot of the time it's actually out of balance, coming back into balance, right? So the vestibular system's working hard in the background. We're just bringing that more into the consciousness. Yeah. It's happening already. And so we're just making the player a little bit more aware of what's going on, and they can use that to their advantage when they play golf.